Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Ksubas daf Nun Hey, we are going to begin on Nun Hey Amud Aleph, the fourth line from the top. Itmar. Ksubas bin Dichron. When it comes to the bin Dichron, which, as we mentioned already in the past couple of dafim, in the situation where a man has two wives, so we want the wife's father to give a large dowry. The problem is he's not going to do so in the fear that when his daughter dies and her husband dies, all of the Yerusha is going to be divided up equally. So therefore, he's not going to want to give all of this money, and it ends up being given to a person who's not even related to him. He wants it to be given to his grandchildren. So therefore, there's this takana of Ksubas bin Dichron, that it's written in the Shtar Ksuba that if she dies and then he dies, the din is that the ksuba goes to that woman's children. And therefore, even though, again, he may have left a lot of money for his grandchildren, so this way it's not going to be divided equally. And it's a way, again, to create an incentive for the man, for the father, to give to his daughter a large dowry. So that was what we talked about. So when it comes to Ksubas bin Dichron, we say as follows: Pumbedisa Amri, in Pumbedisa they said, "Lo tarfa mimishubadi." Now normally a ksuba is there is a shiva to the person who purchased it. So if, let's say, a man wrote a ksuba and then afterwards he sold his field, and then all of a sudden the ksuba kicks in. So since the ksuba was written before the land was sold, so therefore there's like a lien on this land, and therefore she can collect her ksuba from these people. Now, the question is, does that also apply when it comes to the Ksubas bin Dichron? So in Pumbedisa they say lo tarfa mishubadi, that they cannot collect. Why? Because yirtun tnan. Because when it comes to Ksubas bin Dichron, that aspect is considered to be a Yerusha, and a Yerush doesn't collect from Lakuchos. B'nei Masa Machasya Amri, they said that tarfa mishubadi, that yitzbun tnan, actually it's not considered to be a Yerusha, and therefore because of that, it's considered like a regular purchase, and that one is able to then, in turn, like a balchov, can collect from the mushubadim. The hilchas lo tarfa mushubadim, because yirtun tanan. The fact that it says yirtun, therefore, then itself shows it's a Yerusha, and therefore you cannot collect. Okay, that's point number one. Now, metaltali. When it comes to the giving of metaltal, the isnu be'naihu, and it is extant, it's here below shvua. She's able to collect for her ksuba, and it's not necessary in this case for her to have to make a shvua. It's not necessary for her to do that. So Rashi says, metaltale v'isnu be'naihu. So a person designated metaltalin for his wife's ksuba, umeis, the man dies, v'hein be'ein, and metaltalin's here, v'hin nifras mehen, and she wishes to collect from the metaltalin, no taltalin b'shvua. She's allowed to take it without having to make an oath. Now, why would you think you do? So the time of Mayam Rabbanan b'nechsi yisaymim lo tiporel b'shvua, typically a shvua needs to be made if you're going to collect from Yisaimim, because the Chayshinan Dilma Srari Aspasa. Maybe she already received a bundle of money from him. So who knows? Maybe she was already paid. Srari de Atbasa. Over here, this is the metaltalin, because this is the same stuff. It's here. So therefore, since it's here, so therefore the din is that she can collect it. She doesn't have to make a shvua. Let's say it got lost, this metaltalin, so it's not around. So we don't know. Did she get it before? Or did she not get it before? And therefore, should she have to make a shvua? So Pomadis Amri below shvua, but in Mas Mechasi Amri b'shvua, v'hilchas below shvua. So the halach is that you do not need to make a shvua. It's not necessary. Okay. And then we have the following case. Yiched la ara bi'arba mitzranaha b'lo shvua. Let's say he, the man, designated for the ksuba a property in which it's clearly stipulated all 4 of the boundaries. So therefore, again, says Rashi, Devadi sulo matvis lasroi achrini. There's no way she took other property because it was already stipulated this is exactly the land in all of its boundaries. So therefore, she doesn't need to make a shua in that situation. However, b'chad mitzvah, if there's only one boundary mentioned, pumadisa amri below shvua, b'nei mas machase amri b'shvua. Again, they argue. Again, pumadisa says that shua is not necessary. However, when it comes to b'nei mas machase, they say shua is necessary. Hilchos again below shvua. So in both of these situations, we paskin like the b'nei pumbedisa, and the shvua is not necessary. Okay, let's stop here for 1 second because there's a couple of questions. It was like a very dense piece of Gemara. Question 1: Hanifras l'ksubasa. A person is collecting her ksuba metaltali diyasmi. Be'ez oif l'koliyam nifras below shvua. When is she able to collect without shvua? And the answer is if it's in here. If it's here, be'ez oif nifras mekarka l'koliyam below shvua. If it was stipulated all 4 boundaries. Let's see if that's what it says. Question 1: Metatli biyachid lo ksubas of isnu beinaihu mikarka biyachid lo be'arba. The 4 sides. TA9 asks the question: Matai ika plukta. Where is there an argument between pumadisa and b'nei mas mechasia? So they actually mention that, which makes it a little bit easy to remember where the sugi is. Isha goibik subasa. Whether she can collect a ksuba even without a shvua, and halacha goiva, and the halacha she can even collect even without a shvua. So as we said, first of all, when it comes to the notion of metaltalin and it's leisnu be'naihu, it's not extant, it's not here, leisnu be'naihu, or when they designated property, but it was only b'chad mitzvah, only one boundary. So in that case, it's a machlokas, but we end up holding like pumbedisa that a shvua is not necessary. Okay. Now the Gemara says, Omer la'edim, a person says to witnesses, kisvu, to write the document, v'chismu, and sign it, v'hovule, and give it. Says Rashi, kigoyin matnas karka, a person is giving land. So if you said all of this to these witnesses, so the din is like this. Kanu mine, if the Edom actually made a kinyan, in that situation, lo tzarch imluche be. They don't need to consult him. So in other words, they don't have to ask if he changed his mind. Since he gave it to you to give it to someone else, so therefore it's not a problem. Fine. Says Rashi, Ima dain oimed bediburo shichtavulo the kivon de kanumimenu stam kinyan l'ksiva oimed. So since I made a kinyan on it, it was obviously l'ksiva oimed. So we don't have to ask him again if this is really what he wants to do. Let's say lo kanu, if they didn't make a kinyan, mine, so pomadisa amri lo tzarachem luchebe, still do not need to consult him, b'nei mas mechasi amri tzarachem luchebe, there's a tzarachem luchebe. Here in this case, mas mechasi finally gets the halacha like them. Now the quote of the Mishnah, Belezman Azaria v'chulu. So we mentioned a machlokas. When it comes to manam masayim in the Tosefah, certainly from the time of Nesuin, if they're divorced or she becomes a widow, she collects everything. The machlokas is what happens if this happens during erison. Do we say that she collects everything, the entire ksuba, even the extras, or only the manam masayim? So that is the machlokas. Imar Rab Nosin Chad Omer Halacha Kerbelezim Nazaria. The Chad Omer in Halacha Kerbelezim Nazaria. Now this time Rab Nosin who the Omer Halacha Kerbelezim Nazaria. The Shaminale Rab Nosin the Ozel Basar Umdana. It makes sense that you should go Basar Umdana. In other words, based on logic. So why would he give her all this money if he ends up divorcing her after Kedushin? His whole intention, as we're going to see better explained on Vav and Aleph, his intention is for Chibas Bia. in order to be able to actually perform the suin. That's why he gave all this extra money in her ksuba. But if it doesn't get to that point, then he didn't want to give her that much. He would only have to give the smallest amount, which is, again, meaning we go basar umdana. We think logically. Look at Rashi. Basar umdana. Oimed hadasad bedavar. We basically evaluate the situation. Stam inish lahachi echavin. L'kaisev l'mamayno chinam el chibas bia. He's not going to start giving away all this money except for chibas bia. Okay. So the also basar umdana. The Yomi Rab Nasan halachik Rab Shimon shizuri b'masukin. We find also in a different situation, which we're going to see in Rashi, another notion of going basar umdana. So what is that? So it's Gemara in Masechtas Gittin that says that if you have a situation where a person is going out and he's like traveling, and he says, "Kisfu get liishti," write a get for my wife. Now he doesn't say the word tenu. You're supposed to say write and give this get, because maybe just writing it, just hold on to it. I'm not telling you to give it, so maybe you're not allowed to. So in this Rashi says, "Hari'il yichtav yitnevu." You can still give it to her. The machmas tirdaso shu boihol al nafshay, since he's so busy contemplating regarding his own situation, that's the reason why he didn't say it. Lo hispig ligmor devara b'mikara shichtav tenu nischavin. Rishim shazuri amar afa masukin hagaise, someone who's dying. V'hainu basar oimdin. Daito d'amrinin loy amar kisu el shinu haya masukin hu lo nischavin l'sachbay. He's not planning, making jokes with her, teasing her, writing it and waving in front of her. No, he actually wanted it given over. But either because he was about to be sentenced to death or he's sick. So all these situations is going basar umdana, that we assume that even though he didn't say tenu, that he actually wants the get to be given. So we see again this notion that Rav Nasan goes basar umdana, and therefore l'chayra must be Rav Nasan who's going to hold like Rav Elazar ben Azariah, who also goes basar umdana, as we continue to nun hey amud beis. So on this the Gemara says, Uvitrumas meiser shel demai. Also, when it comes to trumas meiser shel demai, we say the same thing. What's that? So Rashi says, quoting a Mishnah Masechtas demai, trumas meiser. Now, normally you're supposed to give a Levi 10%, and meiser min a meiser, or trumas meiser, the Levi gives to the Kohen another 10%. Now, the din is, when it comes to trumas demai, trumas meiser shel demai, it was uncertain whether this was actually the Trumas Meiser was separated, shechazor limkoimai, that it fell into the original pile. The aser esachulin mishum meduma. So the problem is, all of a sudden everything's all mixed up, and it causes a problem with the stuff which is chulin. So Shimon Zuri Oimer af b'choyel sho'alol ama aretz sholakach imenu haperos halolu, that you should actually go to the Samaritz you purchased the fruits from, the oichlan al piv, and you can eat it through his mouth. If he says, "Hey, farashti masraisav," karoi, if he says, "I separated it," ad shlo mechartim lach saimech alav, the hoyel min the rabbanan who him knew who rabbanan b'makam seda. The rabbanan are lenient when it comes to a financial loss, and therefore for that reason you're able to eat these fruits. Ki hacha she'ein lo takana lachsar lahafresh el moichel kohanim b'demei truma. In this over here, there's no takana to go back and to be mafresh it. Rather, you'd have to sell it to the kohanim for the value of truma, because maybe there's truma still in it. It would be a tremendous financial loss because of supply and demand. So haydanak at apachol mishum dekatani hasa milsa achriti v'yesh lachiluk demishabes sho'al v'oichel apim mimnei oining shabbos shabbos lo yoichel ad shiaser. So it's possible, again, that the reason why it mentions chol, because maybe for owning Shabbos there's a special leniency. Okay. So again, we find that there is this leniency when it comes to Trumas Meiser Shel Demai. Ravoy also basar umdana. So we're saying that he goes basar umdana, but Rab doesn't. Bahait mar matna shchimira. When it comes to a gift of a shchimira, so in this situation, Rashi brings down that we're lenient. In sricha kinyan shetiknu chachamim, we don't require the shchimira to do a normal kinyan like we normally require. So actually what we do is we give two strengths. Nasan ba koyach bari. On some level we give him the strength of being like a healthy person. And says Rashi all the way to the bottom, the ilu gabi bari mishum kinyan lo kanibe shein matbeyan nikne b'chalipin el agav karka. Okay, so let's look in the Gemara. So matna shchimira shekasaba kinyan. He wrote a kinyan bebei Rav mishmei the Rav Amri archve atre richshe, that he's riding on two horses. What does that mean? Again, because we give him certain koyach as a chayla and also as a bari, which we'll discuss in a second. Shmuel Omer liyadana my edun ba. So he says, I don't understand this. Bebei Rav mishmei the Rav Omer archve atre richshe. Harihi kamatnas bari, v'harihi kamatnas shchimira. So basically the Gemara explains it here. How is it that he is like bari, and how do we find in another element he is considered to be halachically like a shchimira, which I think is going to be question TB 10. Matnas shchimira shekasuba kinyan archve atre rachshi. Leinin ma kaicha mishum matnas bari, leinin ma kaicha mishum matnas shchimira. Okay, so harihi kamatnas bari. This is the answer right here. This is TB 10. So on certain level, we consider him like a bari. In how the im amad in yochel lachserboy, that if let's say he becomes healthy again, so he cannot retract. So im amad in yochel lachserboy. So if he gets up from his deathbed, it's still chal, since it was given b'koyach bari. Harihi kaman shchimira. How is he like a shchimira? She'im amar halvasi leplini. I lent to leplini. Halvasa leplini. The loan is transferred to Ploni. So by just him making that statement, that is sufficient. Let's hold off 1 second. Now let's look at how TB10 answers this question. So again, when it comes to Manish Chemira, we're lenient and we say that what he says, it's like a kinyan. Therefore, if he Shi'im Almad, if he stands up, Enu Chayzer, he cannot retract Kematnas Bari, like a person who is healthy. Shi'im Kaisaba Halva, Kaina Mishim Matnish Chemira. But if he writes that he wants it transferred over, then it's automatically transferred over, which is a leniency for a shchimira. Okay. Shima Omer Halvez Lulaponi Halvas Lulaponi. Shmuel Omer Liyadana Ma Edoin Ba. Shema Loy Gomer Laknaisa El Bishtar Vein Shtar Lachamisa. So how do we know this? Maybe he only wanted the kinyan to be with a star. There's no star after Misa, says Rashi. Maybe he didn't want to give anything. Kivan de Meis, once he died, Sulo Matzach Nuyimidi. Maybe there's no kinyan. The Rab Basar Umdana Azal. So we see that Rab goes after the logic. Sha'imid Daito Shalzeh. We look at this person who is sick. Dilar Chaveatre Richshe. Alvad. V'afal Pi. Shalapirish Mapik Rab Mamayna Bahachi. Even though he wasn't explicit in his words, it still works. So we see that he also goes Basar Umdana. So why are you telling me he goes Basar Umdana? We see Rab also goes Basar Umdana. So on this, the Gemara answers that the Machlokas is totally different. Nun Vav Madalv. Ela Tervayu Azi Basar Umdana. And they both go Basar Umdana. So Mandir Mahalacha Shaper. The one who says the halacha is like him, it makes sense. Mandir in halacha Hachinami Oimdin Daitanhu. We're still also, even by Kedushin, we're evaluating the situation. Mishum Ekruvi Daitahu, because when it comes to being engaged, at least there is some element of coming close to her. Ikarvele Daita. So even by Bishas Kedushin, perhaps we would say we should go Basar Umdana, that she should be able to get also to Tosefes. Because it wasn't that we just go Basar the that he's only interested in chibas bia, but it's even when we're talking about the b'shas kedushin. We're going to stop here. I'll take question 2. But ma k'mifli Rav Nosson, I halach Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah she'arusa ein la tosafes. So both of them go basa umdana. The machlokas is oim den daito I loy kasav la el chibas bia v'leika. There's no chibas bia. Olak ruvi daita va'ika adkan.